Hello. I'd like to have a quick chat about wrists, postpartum wrists. When I very first became a yoga teacher, I had only just graduated. This is about 20 years ago, and I got given a mums and bubs class. And the mums and bubs class was back when there were hardly any mums and bubs yoga around. And so I did a whole heap of research, having not had any children of my own, into what kinds of problems were experienced by mothers and babies that I could bring into the yoga class. So I did a whole heap of research into shoulders, this feeding hunch, lower backs, pelvises, and the most common thing I found in my yoga class was wrists. So I ended up having to pivot, ended up putting a lot of wrist stuff in my classes. And subsequently, I've now put a whole heap of wrist stuff into my prenatal yoga classes as well. One of the things that is a real big problem is change. So you can decide to do something that is healthy for your body, but is completely different to what your body is used to, and your body will really feel it. A great example is when I was working as an osteopath during COVID, and a lot of people would come in with upper back, neck pain due to their having to work from home and their desk setup. And what most of those people would say is that, but I was given a budget to spend on my desk setup at home. And so I've set it all up correctly, and I've got the latest sit to stand desk, and I've made it all ergonomical. Why all of a sudden am I getting pain now? And it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just the change. You're just using muscles that you haven't used for the 8 hours that you're working, and those muscles are getting sore and fatigued and causing pain. As your body strengthens, the pain will disappear. Same goes for becoming a parent. There's a lot of holding of the head through the wrist. And those wrists, if you haven't done, like if you're a chef, you might be okay, because chefing is a lot of wrist work. But typically the wrists have never done anything like that. So it's well worth it if you're still pregnant, starting on all of this stuff prior to having your baby, because you're starting to strengthen your wrists so that when you hold the baby, we don't get sore wrists, basically. So there's a couple of different things I'd like to go over. First one is we want to keep you holding the head of your baby. So everything else that is wrist-based, really cut that out. Yep. So if you're in a yoga class and you're asked to do cat pose is, again, on the wrists. So you might come onto forearms instead. And if you've got yoga blocks, popping the yoga blocks underneath, that'll give you the same orientation as cat pose, but it just comes off the wrists. Similarly, if you're down on the floor playing with your baby, we don't put the hand out and put all of your body weight onto that hand in order to play with the baby. Move yourself in closer and come into a kneeling position or a sitting position to play with your baby. Think of places where you can cut out any stress on the wrists that is not part of your parenting. The second thing that we want to do is we want to keep them nice and mobile. So my favorite wrist exercise is to interlock the fingers and take them around in a figure 8. And if you've done a yoga class with me, I will do them in a figure 8 like this, and then I'll do them in a figure 8 fast, and then we'll do them in a figure 8 reverse, and then we'll do them in a figure 8 fast. Okay. I like the figure 8 best as the wrist loosening exercises because there's not as much brain involvement. There is brain involvement in the fact that you're making the shape, but there's not brain involvement. If you do this with your wrists, your brain is thinking, tense this muscle and then tense this muscle. Close this side of the joint and then close this side of the joint. So it's very still kind of compressed, if you like. When you do this, the joint is oscillating, it's moving, there's less compression, there's less holding and tension in through the joint. So these ones are still quite good, and you may wish to do like a full sort of stretch here or a stretch here. The second thing is, or we're up to the third thing now, is building some strength through the wrist. So this is really for somebody who is pregnant. If you're not pregnant, your strength training is your holding of the baby. Yep. So if you are pregnant and you'd like to strengthen your wrists in case, what we do is we brace the forearm, pop it onto your leg like this, drop your hand down and back up, down and back up. To start off with, this is probably plenty. If you find that you can do quite a few of these and not get at all fatigued, you might want to start adding some weight. I would suggest, if you're going to add some weight, to buy a litre bottle of water. A litre of water is 1 kilogram. Drink 3/4 of that. Start with 1/4 of a kilo. So we're talking really, really light. When you get to the point where you're going 1/4 of a litre or 1/4 of a kilo, and it starts to get really, really easy, then put more water in, 1/2 kilo, 3/4 of a kilo, a whole kilo. You're probably not going to need to go more than 1 kilo. I'd probably work on, once you're at 1 kilo, repetitions. They're small muscles, so they don't need a lot of weight added to them. All right, so what's that? 1, 2, 3, we're up to the fourth thing. The fourth thing is have a look at the position of your wrist. So if you're holding your baby's head, are you able to hold it with a flat wrist, and so supporting all the way along your arm? Do you have to do this? This position is really, really common, especially for newborns, because we're told to hold the head. And so what we really like to do is really hold the head. They're precious. They feel like that they're easily broken, and so we really hold on, but that is not ideal for the wrist. Where possible, not only a flat wrist, but if you can brace your wrist. So either popping your arm underneath your wrist or popping your leg or a pillow so that your wrist can relax whilst still supporting your baby. Yep. So what are we up to? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. All right. The fifth thing. The next thing is wrist braces. So wrist braces can be really, really useful. Again, the idea being that the strain is not typically on the wrist. The strain is distributed a little bit through the whole forearm. The problem with a wrist brace, I don't know if you've ever used a wrist brace, but they are often chunky. And when you're parenting and doing diapers, that was so American of me, nappies or diapers if you are American, doing fine motor skills to do with your baby, those wrist braces get really in the way. So have a little bit of a play with different types of wrist braces. You might find that a kind of a compression one gives you a little bit of support, not as much as one with a kind of splint in it. But the splint one isn't very practical. The compression one doesn't do as well as the splint type. So you're just going to have to play around with them. You can, if you've got a physio or an osteo or a personal trainer, you can get that kinetic tape or rock tape and tape it. And I might show you that in another video. And that's a really, really flexible way of just adding a little bit of extra support as well. The sixth thing to be aware of is that whilst the wrist is where we feel a lot of the pain, quite often the forearm is involved. Yep. So when we flex the hand like this, it's usually the inside of the elbow. When we do this one, it's usually the outside of the elbow. So predominantly, because you're holding like this, predominantly if you stand in, let's go thumb side, predominantly the problem is going to be your thumb side. So I would get some magnesium spray, or often a cream is really good, and just rub that in to those muscles in there, all the way down the length of your arm. The minute you do it, you'll feel where those sore spots are, and you just spend a little bit of extra time in those sore spots. I would recommend using a magnesium oil, because you build up less inflammation. It's slippery, so as you massage your own forearm, you'll find that rather than getting caught on the skin, you're able to go over the skin. When I work as an osteopath, I don't often use creams or oils because I need what we call skin drag. But if I'm ever working on a postnatal mum with wrist issues, I'm always using magnesium oil, because if I'm using that skin drag, quite often that flares up the problem, and we're trying to get de-escalation or de-inflammation through that area. I think that's all of the things. So I hope that's helpful. I might do a couple of other little short videos on some of the things like the taping and stuff. If there's something else wrist-wise that you'd like to know, maybe you can just pop it in the comments below and I will address it. Thank you. Namaste.